Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl Mahoney and I blog at marveloustales.com about books and writing. So, appropriately perhaps, I thought I would post a video about what I'm reading during a pandemic, because we are still in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. It's April 22nd. The situation changes daily, so it feels worth mentioning. And it's been a little over a month since all of this got started, and I've been thinking about what I've been reading. I have stacks of books right here. And it definitely has been impacted by what's going on in the world. And I'm also finding that it's impacting my blogging. I don't seem to be writing book reviews, even though I've been meaning to do that. So today I was like, why don't I just sit down and talk about what I've been reading instead? Because maybe that'll happen. And maybe it'll be interesting to people what I've been reading. So in my area, we are under stay-at-home orders, and crucially for this topic, the library is closed. It has been closed since mid-March. I actually went in to the library. It was a Saturday. I think they closed like the following Monday or Tuesday. I got in right before the end because I suspected it was coming really soon, and brought home a stack of like 6 or 7 books, just so you know I was stocked. I'm down to one that I haven't read yet, and I've been reading my own shelves quite a bit. So it's limiting my choices, but that's okay. I've been able to revisit some books that I probably wouldn't have picked up otherwise if things were normal right now. It is hitting my ability to read through my to-be-read list because I don't have those books. I was planning on getting them from the library, but that's okay. I read a lot in January, we'll get there later on. It's a minor problem in the midst of it all, and I am so glad right now that I have 600, 700 books in my house. So what have I been reading lately? There were a few that I grabbed on that last run that were kind of impulse pickups. This was my luckiest impulse pickup, Shatter City by Scott Westerfeld, because it's actually on my to-be-read list and it happened to be sitting on the shelf there. It's a sequel to Imposters. It's another series in his Uglies world. The original Uglies trilogy quartet, there's like an extra book that he wrote later, I don't know how exactly they're splitting it up, is great. Highly recommend it. These are pretty good too, so I felt good about being able to get one that I'd actually been meaning to read, in a crisis moment. So that was cool. Interesting read, a little bit dystopia, so maybe not the best, but it's the world rebuilding, or really has rebuilt after a past dystopia. So it didn't hit anything too close to home, at least for me. There is a massive earthquake in this. There's a city that goes into chaos, hence Shatter City, but it's mostly a lot of politics and people trying to figure out who's going to rule, and Frey, the main character, trying to define herself versus her twin. It didn't hit any issues, particularly for me, and was a good read. And now I got to read the third one in the series, but it's all an ongoing process. I also read recently Every Heart a Doorway. This was wonderful. I think I had this one before everything went crazy. The concept is it's a boarding school for children, teenagers, adolescents mostly, after they've come back from a magical world. So Dorothy, Alice, all of these classic characters who go into magic worlds, they go to Oz, they go to Wonderland and come home. What happens afterwards? How do they deal with that? It's not any of those specific characters, but it's very much in that mold. Really cool, quite lyrical, slightly surreal writing style that I enjoyed a lot. It gets kind of bloody in a couple of spots. Yeah, but it was brief and it was necessary to the story, and I could deal with it. I'm usually not one for gross and bloody. I get squeamish, but this was okay. I'm really eager to read the rest of the series now, but my library's closed, so I may already have the second one on reserve, even though that's not going to happen anytime soon. Or I may actually be driven to borrow my husband's Kindle and read an ebook. I can get that from the library still. We'll see. So far, I'm still holding on to my paper books because I like paper, but I may end up on the Kindle. Anyway, this one, excellent. Best one I've read recently, I would have to say. Reincarnation Blues was another find when I was doing my last grab there. Cool Premise. So everyone reincarnates until they eventually achieve perfection. And Milo is our main character here. He has lived 9,995 lives, and he hasn't reached perfection yet. And he's told by his sort of spirit guides that he only gets 10,000 shots of this. So he is coming down to the end, and he better figure this out. And we see his last few lives. He doesn't fully remember his previous lives, but he starts sort of getting inklings and whispers and nudges, I guess you might say, to try and help him in the right direction, although he keeps going wildly in wrong directions. I think what really drew me in on this, besides that I find reincarnation stories really interesting, is that he also has this very, very long-ranging love story going with Death. Death with a capital D, although she prefers to be called Susie. So in between all of his lives, he's meeting up with her in kind of this interim space, and they're carrying on a love affair. But then, he has to go back to life again, and also things are getting intense. So really cool premise. It got really brutal in places. I was not expecting that from either the bright colors or the fact that Death goes by Susie. So I think I actually ended up skimming a few pages here and there because some of Milo's lives are really, really hard. And brutal really is the word for them. More in like sci-fi realms. It wasn't actually like he's living in history and it's brutal. It was more projected futures where horrible things are happening to him. That was an interesting thing too. He doesn't live his lives in chronological order from the outside. I mean, he has an internal chronology, but like life number 12 could be in 1000 AD and life number 50 could be in 20 BC, and then the next one could be 2,000 years in the future from now, and it's all very wibbly wobbly and timey-wimey. If you know Doctor Who, he can just bounce into history at any point, basically. Interesting. Don't know that I've seen that before. Anyway, brutal. Sometimes they're brutal. And there's also one where an asteroid is going to wipe out all of life on Earth. And I'm like, I didn't really need that right now. Thank you. I did finish it because I really wanted to see where it was going to go. But be warned, there's some awful things in here also. And some excellent things. I mean, most of it, like 98% of the book was really good. There's just like, wow, that life was kind of depressing and that life had some really traumatic things in it. So yeah, might not have been the world's best timing, but you grab what you grab on the bookshelves. It happens. So I've read a few other library books. Those were kind of the highlight ones. And I'm down to my last one. We'll see what happens there. I've already been reading some from my bookshelves though. So because I want things that are not brutal right now, I was like, Star Trek is the place to go. I actually had two books that I had not read yet. And I was like, okay, do I read the new Star Trek book or do I read the, well, new, it's not new, you can tell, the unread Star Trek book or the unread Star Wars book? And then I read the subheading on Star Wars. The New Republic faces a Holocaust unequaled in galactic history. And I'm like, yes, Star Trek it is right now. I may yet read the Star Wars one because knowing Star Wars, I suspect it's some kind of like planet-killing weapon, not a virus. And I think I'll be able to handle that, but it's still on the maybe to read stack. So I read Star Trek instead because you can rely on Star Trek when it's classic Trek, at least, to be about a positive, hopeful future. And there will be a happy ending, and you know Kirk is going to pull it out and succeed in the end. So the concept of this one, Star Trek Enterprise, the first adventure, it's not Enterprise the TV show, it's classic Star Trek. This was written before Enterprise the TV show. And it's meant to be when Kirk first comes to the Enterprise, and McCoy is new and Sulu is new and Scotty and Uhura and Spock are already there, but it's sort of the entire regular crew getting to know each other for the first time. So kind of the idea of the not so recent anymore reboot movie with Christopher Pine. I almost said Pike, and now I'm like having a moment, but you know which one I mean. The one that doesn't have a name, or this would be a lot easier. The one that's just Star Trek. Anyway, it's sort of that concept, except like logical. So like they're not giving the Enterprise to a cadet who's straight out of the academy. Like Kirk has previous experience, and nobody else is straight out of the academy either except Sulu, which makes sense because he's the youngest and low ranking, so that's logical. I like the reboot movie. I do. I just had some logical problems with it. That's a different discussion. So I enjoyed this one a lot because sure enough, it was happy and hopeful, and the galaxy is a good place, although of course there are Klingons to be dealing with. And it was fun to see the familiar characters meet each other and try to get to know each other and not really trust each other yet and come to that place where they do. And that was really fun. If I have one quibble, okay, I have two quibbles. One was that Yeoman Rand was like a completely different character. She had this whole traumatic backstory that I don't know where that came from. I mean, it was really interesting and well written. And if it had been someone other than Yeoman Rand, like if it had been an original character, great. So I don't know. Interesting choice. Also, she kept calling Kirk Jim, and that's not really the convention, but I have a feeling she wrote it early on when the conventions were not so much there in how we write Star Trek books yet. So it's okay. It's a small quibble. It was a great read during a pandemic, which may be why, and I didn't do these directly in order, but also from my shelves, I'm like, I think it's time to reread a favorite Star Trek book. So First Frontier, I think I reread this in about 3 days because it was just really good, is one of my all-time favorites. I did another video about my Star Trek collection, so you will have heard me talk about it there. But yes, that is a dinosaur behind Kirk and Spock, because the Enterprise goes back in time and meets the dinosaurs. Actually, the Enterprise doesn't. It's the Guardian of Forever. Some of the characters go back in time to meet the dinosaurs in order to save humanity, and it's all epic and amazing and really science-y. I really noticed that this time around. Like, there's a lot of science, and that's awesome. It makes a kind of crazy premise way more plausible and reasonable, and they just commit to the idea, and it really works. So, loved this. Great choice in the midst of everything, because sometimes a hopeful future is what a person needs to read about. So that was great. I am currently reading Ape's Honor, Victoria's Ape. Is Victoria's? Yes, Victoria's Possessive. That's Queen Victoria, by Michael Panush. And I actually know the author, so that was fun. I bought this book, it just came out, I want to say in early March, and I bought it then. And I was gonna take it to be signed, and now we are not meeting in person, so I gotta wait for that. But I can read the book in the meantime, and that is fun. The premise here is that it's Victorian era, and after Charles Darwin proposed the theory of evolution, there was another scientist who created dynamic Darwinism, where he can evolve animals. They stay physically animals, but they have human level intelligence and they can talk. It's not super sciencey on how that works. I'm just gonna go with it. And so the hero is Cooper Gray, who was adopted by a English lord and is now, some years later, he's an adult. He's now Lord Cooper Gray, and he is hunting down a murderer in England, or in London. And it's pretty cool. It's a cool world, and it's cool to read one where I know the author. And I saw some bits of this when it was still being written. Michael is a member of my writing group, so very cool book. I'm most of the way through. You can probably see my bookmark there. So having fun with that one. I also like to keep a nonfiction book going, usually psychology or religion. And I am all out of books that are nonfiction from the library, so I've been raiding my own bookshelves again for that as well. I'm currently reading this one that I saved from a college course. Great spirituality religion course that was about really the scholarship of the Bible and approaching the Bible from that perspective. So A Marginal Jew, Rethinking the Historical Jesus. I haven't read it for 12 years, something like that. So I've forgotten most of it, except that it's really interesting. It approaches the Bible, the New Testament mostly, since it's focused on Jesus, from a scholarship perspective to try to figure out what can we guess it's not quite so definitive as say about what might have been the history of Jesus, what physically, literally happened, what can we know about him and his life. It's not contrary to faith. He actually makes a really big point about that he is religious Christian himself. I believe he's Catholic. And it's not about denying anything that faith would say. It's just setting that aside and trying to approach it from a strictly historical perspective. Really interesting, really fascinating. I'm probably more than half through this, and now I want to read the second book that I never read. I think he actually did like 3 or 4. This book mentions the second one, and I started looking them up, and it looks like he continued the series even farther than that. But again, the library is closed. You can see this is a challenge for me. It is a small challenge in the midst of it all, but a challenge it is. So that's what I'm currently reading. I mentioned this one's probably on my to-read list. We'll see. I also have another Star Trek book lined up because pandemic, it is time for Star Trek. Doctor's Orders is a great one about Dr. McCoy being in command of the Enterprise, and it's really fun. And I did notice, much as I love, here it is, First Frontier, it is actually a little more Kirk and Spock focused. I mean, there is McCoy. He is definitely there. It would not be one of my favorites if he was not, but it is a little more Kirk and Spock. So I think I need to balance that out with a heavily McCoy one. Maybe. That's probably going to be my next read after Apes Honor. And then, I don't know, maybe a Kindle, or maybe some of my other books. You can see some of my bookcases behind me. I have a lot of them. So on the whole, though, I'm like, slight unexpected darkness aside, I am aiming towards the hopeful and the positive at the moment because that is what I want. I hear dystopias are like really popular at the moment, which I'm sure there's a reason for. And if you are reading dystopias, I really want to know why. I'm genuinely curious because I'm definitely leaning towards the give me something happy in the midst of a weird world. So that is what is influencing my reading at the moment. Please share, what are you reading in the midst of the craziness? Because I think we're all experiencing a strange time at the moment. And I'd love to hear what you are reading, how it is impacting your reading. And I hope you are finding a book to read and many other things as well that will help you through this time. So thanks so much for watching. And I'm sure I'll get back to written reviews eventually. It's still a plan. I've just... things are weird, so my blogging might be a little bit weird for now too. So thanks again for watching, and throw in a comment about what you're reading. I'd love to hear.